Okay, so I genuinely think we're about to have some fun. Okay, so about a month ago, I was sitting here and I decided to Skype one of my OG guitar playing friends. And when I mean OG guitar playing friends, I mean from back in college, he knew me when I was first learning anything more than like power chords and open cowboy chords to strum on the acoustic. And as always, we were just catching up and we ended up getting on the conversation of, oh, where are you in town? Are you playing any gigs more recently? Are you going to be playing any gigs in the future? And I kind of stopped and I sighed and I was like, actually, outside of just playing the gig at my church, just playing there on Sundays, I really haven't been playing anywhere at all. I haven't been doing any playing outside of just recording for friends and for myself. And I don't necessarily have many gigs coming up in the future. And even when I play some of those church gigs, I usually just bring a big digital unit. And while I love the Headrush Prime more than anything, it's been fantastic for those purposes. I remember about 6 months earlier, I had built my dream pedal board. I had put everything I wanted on there. And I felt like it would be something that I would use for the foreseeable future. But what I didn't realize is that as a guitar player, as you get into new environments, as you start to do new things and focusing on new styles of music, your ideal dream pedal board always changes inevitably. So I thought to myself, since those needs have changed over the past 6 months, and I realized that I do have a couple of gigs coming up, why don't I try and be a little more organized, see what I need for those gigs, try and create the ideal pedal board for right now, and see what happens. So you would think step one has everything to do with this, but we don't even need this yet. Step one is identification. You need to identify what this pedal board will even be used for and just where you'll be using it. So since I'm going to be playing a lot of worship guitar, I need the pedals and the overall vision for all of this to fit that vibe and to fit those gigs. All right, step two is inventory. And this is one of the fun ones because it's just like, what pedals do you actually have? Like many people, like many guitar players, my gear acquisition syndrome has gotten to very bad levels, and even more so than guitars, sometimes I feel like it's pedals. I've been collecting pedals for probably about 8 or 9 years now. I've sold some, I've bought some new ones, I've had some new ones come in. So this is gonna be very interesting. They're gonna be cuts. So my third thing is actually limitations. And I know there are some guitar players out there who need gigantic pedal boards. I think earlier in my gear and my guitar playing journey, I wanted to be one of those guys who brought like 50 or 100 different pedals, who had the biggest pedal board. And I've seen that work for some people. Johnny Buckland of Coldplay is one of my favorite pop guitar players in the history of this known universe. He has a gigantic pedal board. But for where I'm going right now and for the types of gigs I'm doing, I just don't need that. I just don't need that at all. So I'm limiting myself to the space I have right now. This can fit about 8 small pedals, maybe 7 if there's a bigger one. I'm going to try and do this while saving as much space as possible. And the fourth thing, which I feel to be the most important, is the actual order that these pedals are going to go in. Because you can have all the right pedals, but if you're not having them in the right order, which is something I really wish I would have focused on in my younger days, because I had a couple of pedals and I would just bring them to gigs and I would go reverb into distortion, into amp modeler, into whatever. The order is not just where you can be the most creative, but it's where you can get the best possible sound. So there's some general guidelines that I like to follow, but outside of that, for these upcoming gigs, this is where I'm really gonna be able to play with some things and see like, okay, what do these different pedals sound like? How do they sound next to different ones? And how can I change this up a little bit from what I've been doing? You just start off easy and then you go from there. First pedal, D'Addario pedal tuner. I showed up to a gig like 2 years ago without a tuner. I never ever want to do anything like that again. So it's always the first thing in the chain. There's really no creativity yet, unless someone wanted to put their tuner after their reverb or something. I don't know, people do crazy things. Number 2, my absolute favorite effect for guitar without question is compression. Ever since I became a Corey Wong fan and started playing funk like a couple years ago, it's something I use all the time. I tried to not use it for a while, but I think there's an appropriate place for it. I just like to take down some of those transients before it hits any of the drives, and I feel like you can shape a lot of your tone that way. So Pigtronics Philosopher's Gold compressor. I've had it for like 6 or 7 months. I set the blend knob pretty high on there. is where we get to uncharted territory, at least for me as a player. I have never in my life before this moment put this in my rig, but for the style and the context in which I'll be playing, this is one of the most important pedals. Micropog, electro harmonics, octave pedal. But you can just fatten up some of your lead lines, and that's super important. And I feel like that can really set you apart without instantly thinking, oh, I just need more and more drive. Speaking of drive, going to the drive section, I didn't really know what I was gonna do here. I didn't know how this was gonna go. There's so many different overdrives and distortion pedals that I thought of using here, but I actually changed it up quite a bit because I'm not necessarily using the cleanest amp in the world. I'm using an amp that we'll get to in a second, just at the edge of breakup, so I can really play with my volume knob on the guitar. So I wanted something that can just give it that extra, not boost, but that overdrive. Chat Breaker from Rev. It's got a blues breaker circuit. I really like it. I turn the drive up to about 3 o'clock. And once I get this thing going, once it really hits with that broken up style amp, this thing is beautiful. Here's the coolest part, and another super hard decision, because the amount of amp in a box and all-in-one pedal platform pedals that I have is getting to a ridiculous notion. Probably the style of pedal that I have the most of. However, I always keep coming back to the Walrus ACS1. It has 3 different styles of amps and like 6 different styles of cabs, which I didn't even know about until like 6 or 7 months of using the pedal. And one of the cool things is it just got a firmware update, which I saw everyone talking about on my recommends, and I was like, okay, it got a firmware update. What, are they giving us one new amp? This thing actually sounds better, and they completely changed the gain knob. When you play it along with a little bit of the grit from the compressor, and with the drive, and with the boost on a slightly broken up amp, you don't need that many overdrives or distortion. You can just get a little bit here, a little bit there, and it all comes together to give you like a sick sound. And just generally, I like being able to go DI in, not just in the studio because of my neighbors, but being able to bring this to a gig, getting the consistency of knowing that I won't have to rely on anyone's amps and I know my settings. That is huge. So here's one of the more important parts of this entire schematic. Outside of the dry compressor funk thing, reverb is my only always on pedal other than a boost at sometimes. That is where I found the Oceans 12 stereo reverb. And I found that it's unbelievable, not just because you can get 2 separate styles of reverb, but you can stack different effects because it doesn't just have reverb, it actually has a shimmer. So I like to use the plate just generally as my always on for like church and worship style stuff, but it also has the tremolo and it has the shimmer. So I can vary between those and just get whatever I need for the specific song. I had sort of a renaissance with plate reverb where I had always been using halls. Pedals like this and the Heavenly from Universal Audio just showed me how cool plate reverbs can be. And with this one, like I said, especially when stacked with a trem, oh my goodness. Last but not least, one of the effects that I've been learning more and more about recently, that if you can master it, you can be a whole nother level of player. Delay. And I chose the Walrus Fundamentals delay. I don't know, I've just been a big Walrus fan, especially with the ACS1. I wanted to see what else they have. I needed something with a dotted 8th note. It has the reverse function, which I wouldn't necessarily use. I love Hendrix, don't get me wrong, but reverse reverb, reverse delay, it's not necessarily something I use. So I'm sure it'll be something cool to have as just like an effect, but dotted 8th note delay is something that I absolutely, absolutely need. I spend a lot of time just joking about how much I hide behind dotted 8th note delay and big reverb, but for the effects and for the places where I play, they're literally necessary. So we did it. And I truly do think, and I'll continue to believe, that pedal boards are one of the ways where we get to flex our creativity most as guitar players. No single player will ever have the same pedals, will ever have the same order, will ever have the same thing that they're trying to accomplish. So it's cool to see just how much my tastes have changed and just how what I specifically need in the last 6 months have changed, and how that's gonna affect me in the future when I go to these gigs in a couple of weeks, or even when I just bring this board to church. It's really cool to learn about the octave pedal, to learn about some new reverbs and some new delays. But again, it doesn't matter what I think. I wanna know what you think. What pedals would be on your dream pedal board, and have you ever made one? And how has that maybe even changed since the time you made one? Let me know in the comments. Again, thank you so much for watching this video. If you want to know anything more about any of these pedals, I got them from Sweetwater. The links are in the description. It's one of the best ways to support the channel if that's something you want to do. Or if you're just curious about any of the other gear that I use, make sure to check out those links. Like and subscribe if you had a good time, and most importantly, most important of all, have a fantastic day.